Well, thank you for the warm welcome, and I really appreciate being allowed to speak at this conference, particularly being able to speak on the subject of education at the anniversary of one of California's great schools. And as long as we're talking about education, let's do a little bit. Did you know that the government actually owns a right to your house? It owns the right to make nuclear weapons there, which it exercises negatively. Did you know that there are over 700 planets that have been discovered, called exoplanets, that are orbiting other stars? Did you know that if you are on the game show Let's Make a Deal, and you've got 3 doors with a car behind one door and goats behind the other 2, and you pick door 1, and then Monty Hall opens up door 3 to reveal a goat there, you actually stand a much better chance of winning if you switch from door 1 to door 2. So how many people knew all those? 2? 1? If it helps, I didn't know any of that a year ago. I didn't know any of that until I decided to go back to school. Okay, but I didn't go back to school like other people my age who go back to school after a career or different careers. I didn't go to graduate school. I did something different, and I also, one thing that was different about it is I didn't want to spend a dime. Okay, so thus my degree of freedom project, the 1-year BA, or the 1-year MOOC BA. Okay, my project was an attempt to see if MOOCs, massive open online courses that have been in the news so much the last couple of years, did MOOCs and other forms of free learning, could you construct a curriculum, could you spend time to learn the equivalent of a 4-year BA at a liberal arts college in just 12 months using only free learning resources? Okay, now this project didn't come from nothing. Actually, it derived from another project. In previous year, 2012, I had actually done a curriculum on critical thinking. I used the 2012 election as a case study to teach critical thinking skills. And it was a lot of fun. I enjoyed it. It was all free. It's still available at criticalvoter.com. But at the end of it, I recommend that anybody who wanted to go further should take a logic course, take a full semester course in formal logic. And sure enough, as soon as I finished my course, what showed up on the market, on the web for free, but a free college course on critical thinking or logic called Think Again, How to Reason and Argue from Duke University, actually Duke University and UNC, from a company I had never heard of before called Coursera, which, people now know they're one of the most well-known vendors of online free courses, of massive open courses, but I'd not heard of them, but I took the course and it was pretty good. It was college level, it was rigorous, it was demanding. The teachers treated me with respect, even though we just met them over recorded lectures. I thought, I should find out what this MOOC thing is all about. So I read up on it, and for those who follow the story, this was a period of what we call irrational exuberance. It's kind of like what Greg was talking about in terms of the energy sector. Then in 2012, that was the year the New York Times declared the year of the MOOC, and Thomas Friedman was writing about it every 20 minutes, and legislation was filed right here in California to immediately grant students college credit for completing a MOOC class, similar legislation in Florida. There was a lot of zeal, a lot of excitement, eventually a lot of controversy, but I was discovering as I was doing this research that everybody making comments had one thing in common. They hadn't taken a course, or if they had, they'd taken 1 or 2 or maybe taught 1. What was needed in the conversation, I felt, was somebody who had taken enough of these courses to be exposed to the content, the technologies, and all the different subject matters, but really to see can a course of courses, can a sequence of a curriculum of courses, can that be the equivalent of a college degree? So I did the math. I looked up courses, not just from Coursera, but also from other vendors, edX and Udacity. These are the big 3 MOOC providers, but also other companies like the Canvas Network, NovaEd, which delivers Stanford courses, Udemy, which is like a marketplace of courses, some paid, some free, as well as other sources, like the Saylor Foundation, which is not a MOOC provider. They curate courses on a number of subjects, and even iTunes U. And I calculated it could be done. One could take enough of these courses to do the equivalent of a bachelor degree in 12 months using just these free resources. But the math was one thing. Next was the decision to pull the trigger, and that was the sort of those frightening words in my household of why not me? So I gave it a shot. There's actually other people I've met over the course of the year who've taken a lot of courses, even more than I have. But mine was structured very, very specifically. It was to match the degree requirements of a liberal arts university. Okay, so distribution requirements for the first 2 years, major requirements over the course of 4 years, or in my case 12 months. And the idea was that in order to test MOOCs in something other than computer science, which is what they were and to a certain extent still are most well known for, I decided I would major in a liberal arts subject, which is philosophy. Okay, so my freshman year and my sophomore year, there's Think Again, How to Reason and Argue, my first course. The Modern and Postmodern was taught by the president of Wesleyan, where I went to school. But this was put in place to cover the distribution requirements. There had to be a certain number of science courses, a certain number of social sciences courses, a certain number of humanities courses. Junior year and senior year is when I needed to make sure my major was covered. And Coursera and other companies provided a course in Introduction to Mathematical Philosophy, Kierkegaard. Although come my senior year, I had to supplement it with some self-study programs. I also ended up writing a book for MIT Press that became my senior thesis. So that was, the sequence of, approximately 8 or 9 courses every 3 months. But it wasn't just meant to kind of learn a lot. It was really meant as a sort of public experiment. People talk about the MOOC experiment. And mine was a subset of that MOOC experiment to see if this could be done, but also to communicate the experience out. So, the website I showed you before, The Degree of Freedom, I was blogging on that, pretty much daily. I was delivering course reviews so that other people can analyze, read my analysis of what worked and what didn't work inside these courses. And most importantly, just so it wasn't a one-way conversation, there was an interview series that is still available. It's a Degree of Freedom podcast with the people who are players in this area. So people like Anant Agarwal, president of edX, Ran Durung, one of the co-founders of Coursera, Peter Bohl, who teaches ChinaX, which is a 15-month MOOC class on the history of China. He's also the vice provost of advances in learning at Harvard. Sanjay Sarma at MIT, who oversees MITx and edX. And then professors who are doing cool things. That's Michael Roth, the president of Wesleyan, who taught that modern and postmodern course. David Cox, who's teaching a neuroscience course where students actually do experiments on invertebrates in this virtual environment, but they do real-world experiments and send their videos in. Kathy Davidson, whose course on the history of higher education, or history and future of higher education, has created this great crowdsourced project where all of us taking her course are plugging information on our local education scene into a timeline, so that by the end of it, 10, 20, 30, 40,000 people will be contributing to this timeline, something that can't happen in an intimate classroom of 25 that MOOCs are often compared to. And one of my favorite courses, The Ancient Greek Hero, taught by Greg Naj and his team at Harvard. And then students doing interesting things, that fell in the middle of Scott Young. He did the same thing I did, but before there were MOOCs. He did something called the MIT Challenge, where he attempted to get an MIT degree in 1 year by just using some of the open courseware that MIT makes available. So a year of studying, a year of writing, a year of conversation, and I think, at the end of it, what do I know? What do we know? What did this conversation unearth? Well, I think probably it provided some partial answers to some questions. First of all, are MOOCs a revolutionary technology? And my favorite way of judging if a technology is revolutionary or disruptive or whatever the buzz term is up in Northern California these days, was a thought experiment that an economist called Arnold Kling came up with, where if you just imagine that the sequence of innovation or invention is flipped, and if that's the case, would something being presented as new, which was really old, seem like it was really new? For the simple examples, what if we were recording our movies on DVDs and DVRs, and someone came along and tried to sell you on the wonders of the VHS tape? Probably we would all instinctively think that the new VHS tape was inferior to the old, and therefore we know DVDs were an advance forward. But what if by some strange act of fate, the cathode ray tube or the LCD screen was invented before paper, so that all our reading was always done off a screen? And then hundreds of years later, someone came along with this thing called a book. You know, would we look at it and say, you know, what is this primitive thing? Or would we marvel at its portability, you know, at its low cost and at its high resolution display? Harder to say, you know, harder to pinpoint. And I think you can make the same argument with regard to MOOCs. You know, again, what if the internet was always with us, and you know, the dreams of the MOOC makers I had on the screen was always true? Anytime you wanted to learn something, you wake up in the morning, you want to learn genetics or physics or the Iliad, you just tune into your MOOC and get a course from, you know, what they call a rock star professor, and that's how we learned. And then somebody on the street built this new, weird, innovative thing, you know, let's call it a school, where students gathered in small classrooms and got individualized attention. We think, you know, this is a primitive throwback, or we marvel at it and decide, how can we build some of these features of this new thing into mainstream MOOCs? So I think, you know, it's an open question, but I think it's a very interesting question, you know, to think about, you know, what this revolution, the MOOC revolution, is it a step forward, or is it just a new thing that is supposed to live alongside other, what we've been calling traditional education methods? Okay, so then, you know, getting down to the personal experience I had, you know, first question is, are MOOC courses the equivalent of college courses, right? I went to college years ago, so I know what that was like. And you know, these courses were similar in some ways, dissimilar in others. And I think the answer to the question of you know, are MOOC courses equivalent to traditional courses are, it depends. You know, some are. Some courses were based off of existing college courses, and an attempt was to fit as much syllabus material into those courses as possible, particularly ones from MIT and Harvard are very much as close as they can get to the original course, as close as technology will allow. But other courses were not. Other courses are gravitating to 6 to 8 weeks. They are designed that way. You know, professors are liberated from the semester system. They don't have to, you know, if they have 3 subjects they love to teach, they could teach 3 separate MOOC courses. And the learning in there was terrific, but it was not necessarily the equivalent of a full semester course, even though, you know, when I was toting up my courses for my 1-year BA, I counted most of these MOOCs as equivalent. Which gets to the next question, you know, was my 1-year BA the equivalent of a 4-year degree? You know, as it came close to the end, that's the question I got asked more often than anything else, understandably. And, you know, having studied philosophy for the last year, I was prepared to take both sides of that issue. And you know, on the prosecution side, you know, if the question was, did I do as much work last year, as much work as I did last year with papers and lectures and tests and things, you know, was that the equivalent of what I put into my 4-year degree? And the answer is clearly no. You know, I wrote a lot of papers, but not the same number of papers I wrote over the course of 48 months when I went to college previously. You know, I took a lot of tests, but they weren't as rigorous and demanding because they were machine scored, et cetera, et cetera. So in that sense, the experience was less than a 4-year degree. But, you know, to take the other side, is college the work you did when you went there, or is it what you become at the end of it? You know, if I handed out pieces of paper to everybody now and asked you to write down the names of all the courses you took in college, you know, probably some of you would get, you know, half to 2/3 of them, get the names somewhat close to correct. And you know, as another thought experiment, what if I gave you an exam from then? You know, the one you passed with flying colors. You know, I could see the panic in a room whenever I asked that question. Okay, you know, but does that mean you didn't learn anything in college? You know, the answer to that is obviously no, right? Because if I gave you a week to prepare, you could dig out your old textbooks and dig up information from the internet. And that information would somehow find, you know, a match with the a priori knowledge that you did retain from that 4-year degree experience or that college degree experience, and you probably do okay. You know, you could probably write that paper, you could probably pass that test. So in that case, college is what you become. And you know, in my case, my final exam was I attended the American Philosophical Association conference at the end of the year. Pretty much my final exam was to see, can I attend it, can I go to sessions and not feel like an idiot? And point of fact, I went and I understood everybody. It took 1 to 2 sessions on Kant, who I'd studied, a session on Locke I'd studied. I went to a keynote of about 2 philosophers I'd never heard of before, but followed right along. So, you know, I was not the peer of the PhDs in the audience. They could have eaten me for lunch if I got into a refutation duel with anybody. But I think one can make the argument that I am the equivalent of as a graduating senior with a degree in philosophy. So in that case, if college is what you become, not necessarily the work you did, perhaps I did earn a BA. Okay. So running out of time, so I think we'll leave any questions about sort of what next for MOOCs to whatever burning question is out there. But I want to thank everybody for who put this together, and thanks for including me. You take care.